Welcome to the Bookistrator, where I share the stories I love through illustration. We are doing something really different with this video today, my friends. In April of 2024, I was really struggling with the painting I was working on for this channel. It's one that I actually still haven't finished, but still work on between other pieces when I get time. Anyway, I was really struggling with that piece, and I realized I needed to take a step back and do something else. But I didn't want to start another Bookistrator project. I wanted to draw something utterly indulgent and give myself the space to experiment and have fun with a painting, instead of trying to make something book accurate. In May of each year, there is a fun arts challenge started by Tom Bancroft. He was a character designer for Disney in the 90s. He created the beloved character Mushu and worked on Tarzan, The Lion King, Aladdin, and Brother Bear, among several others. He started the challenge by doing a silly illustration of two mermaids talking on their shell phones, inspired by his own kids. This sparked an art trend and has become an international art challenge called Mermaid. I've participated in it since 2018, back when I was still in school. I was still 100% a traditional mediums artist back then, and really enjoyed making this piece with watercolor and colored pencils. In 2019, I created these three for both the challenge and an assignment for class in greeting card design. I never finished or posted the one I did in 2020. That year was a bit rough for me artistically. To keep with that trend, I also never finished this one in 2021, but I wish I had. It had a lot of cool potential, and I like it a lot more now. In 2022, I did a large solo gallery show about mythological creatures around the world. 3 of them were mermaids, one from Europe, one from Africa, and one from Australia. Head to my Instagram to read more about these. They were really fun to do. In 2023, I just started working on this channel, so the first thing I ever recorded myself painting was this little 30-minute mermaid. When I found myself struggling with that painting and needing to draw something else, I defaulted to a mermaid. It was almost May at the time, and I figured I'd knock out both things, making my yearly mermaid piece and hopefully making an illustration that would get me out of my drawing funk. Not only did it fulfill both of those hopes, but a secret third thing. I'd gotten into the habit of recording everything I drew at that point, just turning on OBS, my recording software, and letting it keep a recording of how I did things. It wasn't really my intent to make this into a video, but to watch the footage back to see if there's anything I did here that could help with my problem painting. But wouldn't you know it, the next book I read gave me an idea. It was called Mermaids Never Drown, an anthology novel edited by Zoraida Cordova and Natalie C. Parker. I loved this collection, and I picked it up to specifically read June Her's short story called Jinju's Pearls. Some of my other favorites in here were The Deep Water Vandal by Darcy Little Badger and 6,000 Miles by Julie C. Dow. I totally recommend reading all of them. They were each so different, even though they are all about mermaids. This painting we're about to get into is not inspired by any of the stories inside that book, but rather something I think would be my own contribution to the collection. With this idea of making my piece connected to that anthology, I actually wrote my own short story recently to go along with that time lapse, one that fits with my illustration. I'm pretty nervous reading this, as I don't write a lot of fiction these days, but I hope you'll enjoy it. With all that out of the way, let's finally get into some art. Mare's mother sang her to sleep every night. Each song was a little pearl growing in her heart. She listened to tales of shipwrecks, to tales of sea monsters, and she listened to tales of the merfolk. Those were her favorite stories, the ones about beings who could swim faster than a bird could fly. Mare's childhood was woven with these songs, and she couldn't help but wonder if the tales themselves could be real. She hoped they were, and told her laughing mother almost every night how she would someday be a mermaid herself. Mare and her family had lived their whole lives by the sea. It was cold and loud and sometimes angry, but always beautiful. As a child, she had loved to race her brothers into the surf, shrieking like the gulls above. The back fins of the always present sharks, a fair distance out, kept them from going in too deep. a reminder that the water was filled with teeth. These were happy days before the war, before it was only Mare and her father left. He with a fear that couldn't be shaken by the sights he'd seen, she with only one leg left and half a heart gone. They scraped by. Her father was a fisherman. All the fathers and brothers were. All that were left. He would be gone from midnight to dusk, hauling in as many slippery mouthfuls as he could in their lone net. Mare sold the fish to the weary villagers, all of whom tried to sell her their own catches in return. But they helped one another. They spared what they could. 10 herrings for a bag of milk, a string of oysters for a stick of butter, eels for bread. Through it all, the sea provided, and it was always there. Mare dreamt of her mother's lullabies, desperate to stay in their warmth for just a moment longer. But soon her body lumbered out of bed to make a small pot of tea, sunlight just leaking in through the window. She cleaned a fish while she waited for the water to heat, the shriek of the pot barely penetrating her thoughts. Slowly she reached for a rag to pull it safely from the stove. Her every step was measured. It had to be with only the one leg. Furniture in the small room had become the shoulders of a helpful friend, always offered for her to lean upon. She poured the water into the mug and added the loose leaves to steep. The house was a single room, with a loft above where the boys used to sleep. Her bed was below, near her parents', which was sectioned off by a cheerful pink curtain that had seen better days. Her father's side of the bed was never made, but Mare made sure to straighten it each morning. The dining table took up the majority of the room, with a small stove nestled near large cabinets and the pump sink. A luxury, that pump. That's when she remembered she'd been cleaning a fish. Blood smeared her palms, and she looked at her tea with tired eyes. Red floated daintily in the cup. Making her way to the pump sink, she wrenched the lever up and down and washed her hands in the streaming water, lathering with the fatty soap she'd traded for a mackerel a month ago. She sighed, chucking her tea out the front door, narrowly missing the man, standing, ready to knock. He shouted, lurching out of the way in a panic at her sloshing cup. I beg your pardon, sir, Mare said. She clutched the mug in her pale hands, fingers shaking. He's not dressed like an officer, she told herself, and you have no one left for him to offer condolences for. Then her heart lurched. My father. Pardon? Is my father all right? He wasn't hurt, was he? He's not been himself in some time. Oh, I haven't come about your father, miss. I don't know the man, to be honest. I was hoping to speak to you. Are you Mayor Thomas? I was told this was the Thomas residence. Mare's heart eased. She held onto the door, keeping it ajar as she said, I am Mayor Thomas. What can I help you with, Mr. Smith? William Smith. He kept his hands to his sides, aware of how rude it would be to shake her hand without another man present. She straightened a bit. What can I do for you, Mr. Smith? My father is not at home, otherwise I would offer a seat with a cup of tea, but I'm sure you understand. Of course. No need to trouble yourself. I have come with a business proposition, Miss Thomas. Do you have a moment to hear me out? Certainly. That is very kind of you. He was of average height, with skin a little redder than hers. He ran a hand through his sandy hair, then replaced his cap. Light mustaches framed his mouth, devouring his upper lip. Probably a seaman, like her father, if his weathered hands were any indication, and his thick boots. She guessed he was probably in his late 20s, only a few years older than herself. You see, miss, he said, I need someone to look after my son. Your son? Yes, miss. I'm going across the sea to work on the island, and I need someone who can tend to him on the boat ride over. I'll be working on the boat, you see, with no time to look after the little one. And your family? Is your wife not? It's only me and the lad, miss. Mary died a few years back from consumption. He paused here, his eyes cloudy. Neighbors can help with him while I'm out working usually, but I've been offered a new job and life I can't refuse, and I want him with me. He's... Mr. Smith took another pause. Were those tears starting in his eyes as he looked over at the sea? He's all the family I have left. he said. Those words reminded her of the hole in her own heart, the people missing in her home. That's where you come in, he continued, voice a little stronger now. I've heard from folks that you are a kindly lady, and with no children nor husband to look after, one of the few who could reasonably be persuaded to help me with this task. And with only the one leg, excuse me? He reddened even further. I'm so sorry. I only meant I shouldn't have said. He sighed, then took in a big gulp of air, his hands open before him. I only meant there aren't a lot of hands that can be spared, what with the rainy season coming. But with you unable to fish, I was told that maybe I could be spared. He pulled his hat off and started to wring it through his fingers. Mare felt cold. She wasn't needed much, was she? She pulled her mother's worn gray shawl a little bit tighter, the mug in her hand a chilling weight against her fingers. How old is your son? She asked. Mr. Smith looked up, a glimmer of hope in his dark eyes. He's 3, miss. A good child, very obedient. Mare nodded. Am I to be paid? He placed his hat back on his head. Aye, of course. An eighth of my wages, if that's agreeable, and of course fare there and back again. To all be paid when we reach the island. Mare thought a moment. When would the voyage depart? I would need to confer with my father. Of course, of course. Not till the end of this week, miss. That is, if you are interested in helping us. She gave a swift nod. I'll talk to my father tonight and get word to you tomorrow. But unless he has an objection, I would be willing to help. I find it... She paused. I find it admirable that you would work to bring your son with you, instead of fostering him here with another family. Mr. Smith smiled at that. Thank you, miss. He's all the family I have left, and I want to be with him no matter how difficult. I shall ring in again tomorrow morning, if that's agreeable. Yes, until then. Have a pleasant day, Miss Thomas. You as well, Mr. Smith. Mare eased the door shut as the man walked down the path to the main street of town. She placed the cup on the table and began to refill the kettle with a new batch of water to boil, clearing the rest of the blood as she waited. That evening, Mare ladled out another scoop of stew into her father's bowl. Fish head broth, good for aching bones. Her father had many of those, and she could only hope this would help. He took another small sip, a bit of dark liquid clinging to his beard. She and her father were both tall. Her whole family had been. They both spotted light wispy hair. His had grown even lighter and wispier in the last few years. What do you think, father? Mare asked. Should I take Mr. Smith on or let him search for someone else? His dark eyes lifted a bit from his meal to her hands on the other side of the table. You're grown. Make your own decisions. But I'd hate to leave you for the 2 days it'll take. I can take care of myself. Mare worried at her fingers, little scars from cutting fish in every groove. That is true, father. I could make meals ahead for you to eat when you return each evening. Maybe even ask Widow Jenkins to come dine with you? Unneeded. He took another delicate slurp. Was he eating around the heads? He'd gotten so thin as of late. Father, Mare began, I know things have been hard since I lost my leg. Mare felt the waves from that day slap against her 2 thighs, the rocks beneath her toes, the desperation choking her harder than the water. She shook her head. But we still have each other, right? I want to make sure you're all right. He placed his spoon on the table, then started to stand. I'm sorry, Mare rushed to stop him. I didn't mean to bring it up. I know you can't bear it, and I just... He paused, standing with the backs of his knees brushing his chair. This man, Mr. Smith, he's trying so hard to keep his family together. She fingered the surface of the table, worn with years of meals spent together, every inch of this house covered in her family's lives. He reminded me of, well, us. He and his son are broken by death as well, and if I can help him make a new life, even in part, it feels like something will mend. She was breathing heavily, unasked for tears behind her eyes. There was a tense pause. Her father's face was stony, but he sat back down. And then he resumed eating, and Mare saw him bring a small anchovy head to his mouth and chew. She felt the tension in her fingers ease. The morning of the journey was warmer than usual. Mare bundled around the house, using a stool here or a bed frame there to keep her upright. She packed lightly, a blanket, as they would likely be sleeping on deck, an extra sock, her only other one, a mug, and some string. She remembered strings being some of her favorite childhood toys, and the inventive games she and her brothers would create with it. Hopefully it would be entertaining enough for Mr. Smith's son, as she didn't have any proper toys. She also packed a few dried fish and a quarter of their remaining bread. The rest would be for her father to take on his next outing. Finished, she grabbed her sturdy walking stick, the one her father had crafted after she lost her leg a few years back. It was made of driftwood, with a convenient knot jutting out on one side for her to rest her armpit on. It wasn't feminine to hobble about so, but she made do. It took a while to reach the pier where she'd be meeting up with the Smiths. Sand was a lot trickier to walk on with her stick. It liked to sink in further than was helpful. The beach wasn't the quickest or easiest way to get to the docks, but it was the most private. Mare had had enough of the pitying looks from the other villagers. She found Mr. Smith waiting at the edge of the pier before a very homely ship. Paint chipped, figurehead missing, sails on the more tattered side, but it looked seaworthy. Mr. Smith looked antsy, pacing back and forth on the narrow strip of landing stage left to walk on. He saw her and straightened. "My dear Miss Thomas," he grinned, rushing towards her. "Thank you so much for coming. I hope the hour is not too early for you?" The sun was just inching over the horizon, the light a little green in the pre-dawn air. "Not at all, sir. I'm usually up and about at this hour. There are many things that require my attention." She smiled. This was her first time on a boat in years. She'd always loved the rhythmic movements and the sound of the water. "Just so, miss. Here, let me take your luggage." She offered him the limp bag as they strode side by side up the gangplank. Behind her, a man shouted, "Raise plank! Raise anchor!" "Are we leaving already?" she asked as Mr. Smith ushered her away from the sailors hauling up the plank. "Aye. You were the last passenger needed. We're in a bit of a rush, you see. The Crow's boy has noticed a storm coming in. The captain decided we best be under way, or we'd have to wait another day to depart." "I should have come sooner," Mare apologized. "No, no, no problem at all. We'll have plenty of time. Let me just get you settled with my little one, and then I'll help these blokes with their tasks." Mare followed Mr. Smith down into the hold below the deck. She used the walls to steady herself rather than her stick, as the passageway was narrow. It was dim below. She could just make out a few barrels and hammocks before being led to a small door. "Your son is down here?" she asked. "I hope he's not frightened." "Nah, he's a strong lad." "I never did catch his name, Mr. Smith." "Never told you one." He laughed a little as he opened the door. He scooted to the side to let her enter first, keeping a fist on the handle. She could barely see, so she took small, careful steps, her hand bracing once again on the wall. There was a shuffle of feet behind her, and then she felt her stick wrenched out of her fingers. A sharp pressure on her back sent her sprawling into the room. She landed hard on what felt like a crate, bruising into her ribs. "Wha—" was all she got out before the door closed. She hauled herself upright using the crate. She reached out fingers to discover the walls around her were close. "Mr. Smith?" she called. Her heart was hammering. What could possibly be happening? "I'm sorry, Miss Thomas." His voice came quietly through the door. "This is simply business. No personal harm meant." "What do you mean? What are you doing?" Her heart was racing. He paused, then said with what could have been pride, "You are needed in a noble cause to keep our nation afloat." He cleared his throat, then continued. "Since the war, there aren't enough women to keep up with the population." Mare's heart sunk. It was like the shark teeth that had taken her leg had come back and taken a bite from her chest now. It was all a lie. There was no child to help, to keep with his beloved father, no family in need of her to stay together. "This must be shocking, Miss Thomas," he said quietly, almost kindly. "But I assure you, you are needed desperately where we are going. I didn't want to lie to you, but we haven't had much success in getting women to come voluntarily. This way goes much smoother, but I am sorry for your distress." Mare stayed quiet, leaning against the crate. Her poor father would be so sad. Another family member gone, no body to bury. Mr. Smith sighed on the other side of the door. His footsteps were dull thuds hammering into her chest, like nails penetrating a coffin, as he left. Mare sank to the floor, her back to the crate, pulling her knee to her chest, seeing nothing but darkness. Mare barely noticed the voices outside some time later. Her eyes were swollen for crying, her head pounding. She was thirsty and frightened, and how had she not known? Why had she trusted Mr. Smith? Because he fed her some story about a family wanting to stay together? This decision felt as idiotic as her childish hope to one day become a mermaid. Mare blew hot air from her mouth as she pressed her palms into her eyes. Two men were chatting in the hold outside her room. She pulled out of her thoughts enough to pay attention to what they were saying. They were discussing the incoming storm, what stew the cook had served for lunch, which of them would have to play the father in need to snag the next woman. That made her fingers ball into fists. "Did you see the one Smith brought in this time?" one man asked, his voice high. "Nah, she a looker?" "Only one leg." They both laughed. "The pickings are getting more and more slim, it seems." Mare clenched her skirt tighter. A shout from above sent them both scurrying away. It was getting chilly sitting here in the dark. The rocking on the boat became more intense as the hours passed by. More shouts from above had her rising to stand, to try the door once more, still locked tight. Thunder boomed outside as the boat lurched suddenly to one side. Mare caught herself on the wall. There was a sloshing sound. She could feel the wet slipping into the holes in her shoes. It was coming in under the door. Would they let her out if she banged and screamed? She hadn't tried earlier. It felt pointless. No one would help her here. But it would be horrible to drown in the dark, cramped room. She was still tilted, the room almost horizontal with what she could only assume were the waves. A snap outside sounded, and a large bang as something heavy collided with the door. Splinters flew as she whirled away, arms up to protect her face. A new sound penetrated her world, the whooshing of wind. She turned back to where she knew the door was situated and was able to make out a large crack, light gently seeping through. A barrel had come loose and smashed her an exit if she could squeeze through. Hobbling over, she reached an arm through the wreckage until her fingers found the lid of the barrel. She pulled herself until her shoulder and other arm were through, careful of the fractured wood, pushing with her leg until she was on the other side of the door. She fell shoulder first into the cold water and scrabbled upright. Leaning on the wall, she peered up the steps to the deck. Everything was at the wrong angle. Had they snagged on a sandbank? Easing her way up carefully, her shoulder braced on the wall, she got her first view of the outside. The deck was empty. The sky was full. Clouds dumped water onto the ship. Lightning cracked in the sky, giving Mare glimpses to her dark surroundings. The mast was leaning at an odd angle. Barrels, crates, buckets, and ropes were piled against the tilted railing, like a giant hand had swept his arm across to clean it. The wind ran in its fingers through the sails, waving them wildly. Where was the crew? Without her walking stick or anything to hold on to, she sat, scooting her way across the deck. She made her drenched way over to the railing, trying not to slip overboard at the sharp angle. Her fingers grasped the wood, giving her something to haul herself upright with. The water was wild below, white caps smashing over and over against the hull. A dozen yards or so out was a lifeboat filled with men shouting at one another and the sky. Mr. Smith wasn't among them, likely already drowned. She looked to her left and saw that the ship was indeed stuck on a sandbar. The storm must have obscured it from the lookout. None of them had come to free her in their haste to escape. Mare's eyes landed once more on the men. One of them noticed her, calling out to the others. He waved with huge sweeps of his arm. He was shouting something, but the sea and sky were too loud to make out. He gestured for her to come to them. To safety, surely. Abandon the sinking ship. Come and live, our precious human cargo, they seemed to say. Mare brushed a sodden lock behind her ear. She watched the men coolly, then turned away from them. She needed a better vantage point to see what her next course of action could be. She pulled herself along the railing until she found another crate that had come undone from its moorings. Just as she began to haul herself on top, she saw the fins begin to surface in the water. The sharks had arrived. Mare watched as they rammed the lifeboat filled with screaming men. One or two slipped off, the water thrashing with the wind and the rain and the hands trying to grasp onto something. The ship leaned a little more, assisting Mare with the last nudge she needed to clamber up on top of the crate. Now she was higher than the railing. She steadied herself with ropes hanging off the mast, gripping on tightly, rain streaking down her face as she blinked to clear her eyes. "Miss Thomas," a voice called. Mare turned, tightening her hold on the rope. Mr. Smith was making his way across the deck, body twisted to keep from slipping over the side. He reached the railing quickly, slamming into it more aggressively than she had. He gulped in a breath, eyes wide as he beheld the crew below, the sharks feasting. He had blood dripping down his face as he turned to her. "The crew!" he cried. The rain pelted harder, making her squint now. "What do we do?" he asked. "We only have the one lifeboat, and that's—" They both looked down at the grisly scene. "That's not an option." He looked over at her, his eyes wild. Then he looked at what she was doing, standing precariously on a wooden crate, clinging to a rope, extended over the water as the ship tilted even further. "What are you thinking?" he yelled. "You wouldn't jump. There's no need to go in the water. Nothing out there to save you. Once the storm lets up, people will come looking for us." Mare clenched her teeth. "People who would return me to my father?" Mr. Smith broke eye contact. "Then I would rather choose the sharks." She leapt into the foam, just like the merfolk from her mother's lullabies. The water was cold, cold, cold. It gripped her lungs with icy fingers and expelled her breath, seeping into every shred of warmth she had left. She might have heard Mr. Smith wail above her, but that was lost to the roar of the waves. The water was dark, lit only by the flashes of lightning. She breached, pulling in a gasp of breath. She began to pump her arms and thrash her leg in a desperate attempt to move away from the sinking ship, taking her only chance to make it home. She only made it a few yards before the pain began. It started in her foot. A shark? She whipped her foot away and looked behind herself. There was nothing there, just a painful warmth in her toes, underneath her worn shoe, slowly leaching upwards. She thrashed as her legs stiffened. The pain crawled up her belly and into her chest, and arms and throat and face and mouth and... Her eyes closed, her world bleeding into total black. When Mare awoke, she could breathe. The air was thick around her, her hair brushing her face in hypnotic movements. The darkness had eased when she opened her eyes fully. Instead of solid blacks, it was a world of grays and deep blues, but nothing distinct. No ship, no lifeboat, no Mr. Smith. Was she underwater? But she could breathe? Mare stretched her leg, relieved to no longer be in pain. It felt odd, stronger somehow. She looked down at herself and screamed. Instead of her one leg, there was a fin attached to her hips. It was long and sinuous, gray and coated in thick shells like barnacles. What looked like gills wrapped the sides of her belly. Her shawl was wrapped carefully around her chest, knotted at the front. Her dress was gone along with her shoes. She turned, scanning the darkness for someone, anyone, with answers. She'd spent her childhood wishing for this, but now it had happened. How had it happened? There was a dark shape in the water, edging nearer. In a moment, Mare could make out its shape, its teeth. The shark swam closer, calm in the inky blackness. It curved around her, slipping close enough to touch. She saw its scarred skin, its bright eyes, the teeth overlapping. Mare was entranced. She had loved these large fish as a girl. They were dangerous, of course, but powerful and beautiful. The shark slowed, then carried on past her, unhurried, unaggressive. Mare touched her shawl. She remembered the last time she'd been this close to a shark. That day she had dashed into the waves and hadn't stopped, wanting the pain of missing her family to finally end. Hating the quiet house, the empty beds, the missing laughter. A small private part of her still wanting to be that mermaid her mother always sang about, even if only for a few moments before she drowned. Instead, a shark had mistaken her for a seal or a large fish. The pain a sharp reminder that she didn't want this end. She swam with desperate fingers until her father found her bleeding on the beach and carried her home. They'd never been the same. She'd never been the same. Her leg was a reminder of that day and all she still had to lose. Mare's tongue touched something sharp, pulling her out of her thoughts, and it was then that she realized she hadn't just been blessed with a fin and the ability to breathe underwater. Mare had been given the teeth of a beast. She straightened, her hair billowing out around her. "Have you come to help me?" she asked the hulking shark. Bubbles left her lips and trailed upward. It made no sign, turning slightly as it swam slowly into the depths. Mare once more touched her shawl. "I'll find you someday, father," she promised. "Wait for me." Mare followed after the shark, clumsy at first in her movements, but growing surer as she followed it into deeper and deeper water. Just like in her mother's lullabies, she would now someday be able to swim faster than a bird could fly, faster than a ship could sail, faster than a man could lie. Thank you so much for watching this video. I know it was a long one. This one was super experimental and nerve-wracking to create, so I hope you enjoyed it. Massive special thank you to my friends Emily, Ellie, and John for being draft readers. Your advice was invaluable, and I hope you like the changes I made. One final thing to mention here, next week's video will be out Friday instead of Thursday to avoid posting on Christmas Day. I'll be spending time with my family, and I hope you have a lovely day whether you celebrate or not. Thanks for being here, friends. See you in the next one. Bye.